Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension in the dimly lit Abbott guest house could have been sliced with a knife, the air thick with fury, betrayal, and something darker that neither Kyle nor Claire could quite name. The argument had started as a whisper, an exchange of wounded pride and bitter words, but it escalated into a storm that neither of them could control. Kyle's face was crimson with rage, his chest rising and falling like a man on the edge of destruction. Claire, trembling but defiant, stood her ground, tears glistening in her eyes as she tried to defend herself from accusations that cut straight through her heart. "You don't understand, Kyle," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to hold her ground. "I never meant for this to happen. I wasn't trying to hurt you." But Kyle wasn't listening. His fury had blinded him, dragging him into a spiral of uncontrollable anger that made every rational thought dissolve into venom. "You think you can manipulate me?" he barked, his words echoing in the room like shards of glass. "You think you can trap me with a baby, Claire? Is that what this is about? You're sick, just like everyone said." Claire's lips parted, and for a brief second, she looked as though the air had been knocked from her lungs. "That's not fair," she whispered, clutching her stomach protectively, as though instinctively shielding the fragile life inside her. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't even know the whole story." But before she could finish, Kyle's face twisted in a way she'd never seen before, a cruel mixture of pain and hatred that made her heart pound. He took a step closer, his fists trembling, his voice rising to a horrifying scream that shook the very walls. "I'm going to make you miscarriage." The words hung in the air like poison, a horrifying declaration that ripped through Claire's soul. Her breath hitched, her vision blurred as the shock and fear collided inside her chest. She stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the couch as her hand flew to her stomach in instinctive terror. "Kyle, no, please," she gasped, her voice barely audible as a wave of pain suddenly radiated through her abdomen. Her eyes widened as the first cramp seized her body, sharp and unrelenting. The agony was not just physical, it was emotional, too, the realization that the man standing before her, the man she once trusted, had just spoken words capable of destroying her completely. Kyle froze, his face going pale as he saw her body fold in on itself. The adrenaline that had fueled his rage began to crumble, replaced by the cold slap of reality. "Claire," he said, his voice suddenly soft, trembling. "Claire, I didn't, what's happening?" But it was too late. Claire was gasping, clutching her stomach, tears streaking down her cheeks as she tried to breathe through the pain. "Kyle," she whimpered, "the baby," those two words snapped something inside him. The horror of what he'd just screamed hit him like a freight train. He rushed toward her, panic replacing his anger, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "No, no, no, Claire, I didn't mean it. I was angry, oh my God, what have I done?" But Claire flinched away from him, curling protectively over her belly as though he were the danger itself. "Don't touch me," she cried, her voice breaking with fear. You wanted this. You said you'd," she couldn't finish, another wave of pain tearing through her as she sobbed. The sight of her breaking before him gutted Kyle. Everything around them seemed to collapse, the sound of the rain outside pounding against the windows, the flicker of lightning illuminating her pale face, and the metallic taste of regret filling his mouth. He fell to his knees beside her, reaching out hesitantly. "Please," he whispered, tears forming in his own eyes now. "Please, Claire, I didn't mean it. I swear to God, I'd never hurt you. I was just angry. I didn't mean what I said." But Claire couldn't hear him anymore. Her world had narrowed to pain and fear. Her breathing was uneven, shallow, her vision swimming as flashes of memory assaulted her, every tender moment they had shared, every promise, every dream. And now it all felt meaningless, shattered by the sound of his voice echoing in her head, that horrifying threat replaying like a broken record. "I'm going to make you miscarriage." She pressed a trembling hand over her stomach, whispering to the tiny life inside her, "Please, hold on. Please don't leave me." Her words came out like a prayer, desperate and broken. Kyle scrambled for his phone, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he tried to dial for help. "Hold on, Claire, please. I'll get you help," he stammered, but his voice was breaking apart. "Everything's going to be okay." But Claire's eyes fluttered closed for a moment, her head lolling to the side as she groaned. The panic in Kyle's chest turned into raw terror. "No, no, no, stay awake. Stay with me, Claire." He pressed his hand to her shoulder, but she pushed him weakly away. "You don't get to touch me," she murmured, barely conscious, her voice filled with betrayal. "You said you'd hurt us." The paramedic sirens eventually cut through the storm outside, a shrill sound that felt miles away but also too close, a sign that this nightmare might not be over. As they burst through the door, Kyle stumbled back, his shirt damp with sweat and tears, his entire body shaking. He watched helplessly as they lifted Claire onto the stretcher, her hand still clutching her abdomen even in semi-consciousness. One of the paramedics looked up at him sharply. "What happened here?" he asked. Kyle couldn't find the words. What was he supposed to say, that he had screamed something so vile it might have broken her body and spirit in one blow? That his anger had manifested into something monstrous? He just shook his head, his throat dry, whispering, "She's pregnant, she's in pain, please just save her." As the door slammed behind the ambulance, Kyle was left standing in the middle of the silent room, his own echo haunting him. "I'm going to make you miscarriage." The phrase wouldn't stop playing in his mind, like a curse he couldn't erase. He sank to the floor, his head in his hands, his heart pounding with guilt. What had he become? He had been hurt before, betrayed, manipulated, but never like this. Never had his anger crossed a line so deep that it could destroy another person's life. He thought about the baby, about the innocence that didn't deserve to be caught in this storm. He thought about Claire, about how fragile she looked, and how her eyes had filled with terror when she realized he meant those words, even if only for a moment. Hours later, when Kyle arrived at the hospital, his world was spinning. The sterile white walls, the antiseptic smell, and the fluorescent lights only amplified his guilt. He asked about Claire at the front desk, his voice cracking. "Claire Grace Newman," he said, "she was brought in, she's pregnant, there was an accident." The nurse gave him a hard look, one that pierced through him like judgment itself, before she pointed him to the waiting area. He sank into a chair, his hands trembling as memories replayed in his mind, the sound of her sobbing, the way her body curled in pain, the way he had screamed something unforgivable. He didn't know how long he sat there. Minutes? Hours? It all blurred together until the doctor finally emerged, his face grim. "Are you the father?" the doctor asked, his tone cautious but direct. Kyle hesitated. The question hit him like a blow to the chest. "Yes," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Yes, I'm the father." The doctor sighed, holding a clipboard. "She's stable for now," he said. "We managed to stop the bleeding, but she's under observation." It was close, too close. "You should know, stress like that can cause serious complications. She's lucky she got here when she did." Kyle's breath left him in a shaky exhale, relief and guilt colliding. "And the baby?" he asked, barely daring to speak. The doctor hesitated for a long moment before nodding slightly. "We believe the baby's still viable, but she'll need to be monitored. Any more trauma, physical or emotional, could change that." Kyle covered his face with his hands, a choked sob escaping him. He wanted to thank the doctor, but the words stuck in his throat. Lucky. That's what they said. Lucky that she survived his rage. Lucky that the baby held on despite the darkness. When the doctor left, Kyle walked slowly toward Claire's room. Through the small window, he could see her lying in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, and four running through her arm. Her hands were still resting over her abdomen protectively, even in sleep. His heart shattered all over again. He wanted to go in, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness, but how could he face her? How could he look at her after what he'd said? He stood there for what felt like eternity, staring through the glass, replaying every choice that had brought them here. The love they once shared, the tenderness, the laughter, now seemed like a memory from another life. He had loved her once, fiercely and foolishly. But somewhere along the way, resentment and mistrust had poisoned everything. He had accused her of manipulation, of betrayal, when in truth, he had been the one losing control. His anger wasn't about Claire, it was about himself. About feeling powerless, about his family's expectations, about the way the world seemed to keep taking from him. But none of that mattered now. None of that justified the words he'd spoken. When Claire finally stirred, her eyes fluttering open, Cal took a step back instinctively, afraid of what she might say. She blinked, disoriented, before her gaze landed on him through the glass. For a brief second, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and sorrow, then turned away. That single moment broke him more than any slap or scream could. She didn't have to say a word, her silence screamed louder than anything. She would never look at him the same way again. Outside her room, Jack Abbott arrived quietly, his face heavy with disappointment. "Kyle," he said softly, but his tone carried the weight of judgment and heartbreak. "What did you do?" Kyle couldn't answer. He could barely breathe. "I lost control," he said finally, his voice hollow. "I said things I can never take back. I hurt her, Dad. I hurt her so badly," Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "Son, anger can destroy everything you love if you let it. You've got to make this right, not for yourself, but for her and that baby." Kyle nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know if she'll ever forgive me," he whispered. "And I don't know if I deserve it." As night fell over the hospital, Kyle remained in the hallway, unable to leave but too ashamed to go inside. Claire slept fitfully, whispering in her dreams, sometimes calling his name, sometimes crying softly. The baby's heartbeat echoed faintly through the monitor, a reminder of the fragile hope that still existed between them. And in that cold silence, Kyle finally realized the full horror of his actions. Words could wound deeper than any blow, and once spoken, they could never be unsaid. He had almost destroyed 2 lives with one sentence. Now, all he could do was pray that he might one day find a way to atone, though he knew forgiveness might never come. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds of the hospital room, painting soft gold lines across Claire's pale skin. The quiet hum of machines was the only sound that filled the air, a constant reminder that life, fragile, unpredictable life, still lingered within her. Her eyelids fluttered as the sedative began to wear off, the world slowly coming back into focus. Her throat was dry, her body weak, but one instinct overpowered all others, her hands immediately moved to her stomach. A tear slid down her cheek when she felt the faint but steady rhythm of the baby's heartbeat under the monitor. The baby was still there. Still alive. A sob of relief escaped her lips, but it was followed by a wave of sadness so deep she could barely breathe. Memories of last night clawed at her mind like thorns. Kyle's voice. His face twisted in rage. The words, those words, cut deeper than any physical pain she had ever endured. "I'm going to make you miscarriage." It wasn't something she could ever unhear. Even though she knew he hadn't touched her, the emotional shock had been enough to send her body into chaos. She turned her head slightly, noticing the small bouquet of lilies on the table beside her, her favorite flowers. There was a note beside them, hastily written, crumpled at the edges. Her hands trembled as she reached for it, unfolding the small paper. "I'm so sorry, Claire. I didn't mean any of it. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that. Please let me make it right. Kyle." The words blurred through her tears. Part of her wanted to tear the note apart, to erase the reminder of the man who had caused her this pain. But another part of her, the part that still remembered the man who once held her under the stars, who whispered promises of forever, ached with confusion. How could love and hate exist so violently inside the same heart? Outside the room, Kyle sat slumped in a chair, his head in his hands. He hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Every second that passed felt like a punishment, like time itself was reminding him of the damage he'd done. When Jack arrived again that morning, carrying coffee, Kyle barely looked up. "You're still here," Jack said softly, setting the cup down beside him. I didn't think you'd be able to face it. Kyle rubbed his temples. I can't leave her, he whispered. Not after what I did. I have to be here in case she needs something. Jack sighed heavily, lowering his voice. Kyle. I talked to the doctors. They said the stress nearly caused a spontaneous miscarriage. That's how close it was. His words landed like blows. Kyle's eyes widened, his chest tightening with guilt. She could have died, Jack continued. You could have lost her, and your child, in one night because of your temper. I know, Kyle whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking. I know, Dad. You don't have to tell me what I already feel. It's like my heart's been ripped out. I don't even know who I was last night. It wasn't me. I swear it wasn't. Jack placed a hand on his shoulder, his tone softening. It was you, son. It's the part of you you've been refusing to deal with, the anger, the jealousy, the guilt. It's time to face it before it destroys everything. At that moment, the door to Claire's room creaked open. Both men looked up as the nurse stepped out, adjusting her clipboard. She's awake, she said quietly. But I should warn you, she's not ready to talk to anyone right now. Especially you, Mr. Abbott. Kyle's heart sank. Can I at least see her? Just for a minute? The nurse hesitated, her expression unreadable. If she allows it, she said finally, before disappearing down the hall. Kyle swallowed hard, standing on shaky legs. Jack gave him a look that was both cautionary and sympathetic. Don't push her, Jack said. If she tells you to go, you go. You've done enough damage. Let her set the pace. Kyle nodded silently and approached the door, his hand trembling as he pushed it open. Inside, Claire looked so fragile it almost broke him. Her golden hair was tangled, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She didn't even look up when he stepped in. The rhythmic beep of the monitor filled the silence. He stopped a few feet from her bed, afraid to get too close. Claire, he said quietly, his voice rough from sleeplessness. I know you probably don't want to see me. But I needed to tell you in person that I'm sorry. Not just for what I said, but for everything. For not listening to you. For letting my anger control me. For almost, he couldn't finish the sentence. The word miscarriage caught in his throat, choking him with shame. Claire finally looked at him, her expression blank, detached. You don't get to say that word, she said softly, her voice trembling but sharp. You don't get to talk about what almost happened like it's just a mistake you can apologize for. You nearly cost me my baby, Kyle. He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. I know. And I'll never forgive myself for it. Good, she said coldly. Because I'm not sure I ever can either. The words hit him harder than a slap. He took a shaky step closer, his voice cracking. Claire, please. You have to believe me. I didn't mean what I said. I would never hurt you. I lost control. I was scared. Angry. I thought you were trying to trap me, and I. Trap you, she repeated, her tone rising, disbelief and pain mingling in her voice. You think I wanted this? You think I planned to get pregnant just to keep you? My God, Kyle, you make it sound like love is a crime. Kyle dropped his gaze to the floor. I was wrong, he whispered. I was wrong about everything. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve any of it. A long silence followed. Claire stared at him, her mind torn between fury and heartbreak. You know what the worst part is, she finally said, her voice quieter now, trembling with emotion. I loved you so much that even after you said those words, a part of me still wanted to believe you didn't mean them. That somehow, the man I loved was buried under all that anger. But when I felt that pain, when I thought I was losing our baby, all I could think was, you did this. Your words did this. Kyle's tears fell freely now. I'll do anything to make it right, he said desperately. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I'll change. I'll be better. Just please, don't shut me out completely. Claire's eyes filled with tears too, but she shook her head. You can't fix this with promises. You can't fix this with flowers or apologies. What happened last night, those words, they changed everything between us. She turned her head away, her voice cracking. Right now, all I care about is protecting my baby. That's it. I can't think about us. I can't think about love. I just need peace. Kyle's heart splintered, but he nodded. Then that's what you'll have, he whispered. I'll give you space. As much as you need. But I'll still be here, Claire. I'll make sure you and the baby are taken care of, even if you never want to see me again. Her eyes flickered with something, maybe gratitude, maybe sorrow, but she didn't reply. He took that as his cue to leave. He turned toward the door, each step heavier than the last. As he reached for the handle, Claire's voice stopped him. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat tightened as tears filled his eyes again. Because I hated myself, he admitted finally. Because I didn't think I was good enough for you, or this baby. Because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I was afraid I'd lose. And instead of loving you, I tried to destroy the one thing that made me feel alive. Claire's tears fell silently. For the first time, his honesty pierced through her anger, though it didn't erase the pain. Then maybe you need to figure out who you are before you ever come near us again, she said quietly. He nodded, voice breaking. I will. And with that, he left the room, closing the door softly behind him. The moment he was gone, Claire broke down completely. The sobs she had held back all night tore free from her chest as she buried her face in her hands.